to the entertainer talking sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the quotes that came out of the mouth of former New York Giant Brandon Jacobs, who was in attendance at the Green Bay Packers game last week. And what's ironic, when I think about Brandon Jacobs, when somebody says his name, and to be fair, I think about a lot of New York Giants in this game. I think about the Green Bay Packers New York Giants NFC Championship game in 2008. Brandon Jacobs, and it was such a small play. I think it was like 2 yards, but he set the tone in that game. I believe it was the first play from the line of scrimmage for the Giants on offense. He absolutely barreled over Al Harris in like negative 20-degree weather, and it set the tone. He was a tough, gritty football player, and he's a fan favorite. But the most important thing about Brandon Jacobs, and a lot of players on those Super Bowl teams, Brandon Jacobs was a leader. And that is something that this team lacks, and it's something that I don't think he hit home on enough in these quotes. Now, do I agree with everything he said? No. Do I think this team has talent? Absolutely. But the talent is underdeveloped. They're young. But let's jump into the quotes before I give my full thought on what Jacobs said. This is the first thing that came out of the mouth of Brandon Jacobs. If you ask me talent-wise in this locker room, they're better than we were, Jacobs said. Player for player, they have more talent. You have to understand, when we won Super Bowls, we didn't have these amazing seasons. He then later went on to say, everybody wants to point the thing at the coach, but I don't think you can do that, Jacobs said. You can't tell me the guys aren't coming to work trying every day. Everybody says the team's young. This isn't college, bro. This is the NFL. Are we supposed to be terrible until everybody gets to 6-7 years in? We always told the rookies, week 2, week 3, it's over. Ain't no more rookies. And Brandon Jacobs there is talking like a leader. That's how he talked when he was in this locker room. And I remember I made a video last year, Giants-Eagles game, when the Giants got destroyed. I said this team has no leaders. Their only leader on this football team right now, in terms of being a guy that leads by both, vocally and, by example on the football field, is Saquon Barkley, and he was a rookie at the time. And this team still lacks leadership. They don't have any veterans on this team that command respect. Janoris Jenkins runs his mouth a lot about teammates. They don't have anybody on this team that's a vocal leader, a guy with experience and success in the league. That team had Michael Strahan. That team had Antonio Pierce. That team had Brandon Jacobs. Right? That first team, right? The second team, you had a more developed Justin Tuck. You had an OCU Manure. You had an Eli Manning. Right? You had guys that had been in the league for a long time with a lot of success. And to say that we have more talent, I think that's a bit far-fetched. That 2008 team. Now, one thing I always say, that offensive line on that team, you didn't have a lot of individual superstars, right? None of them were, they made Pro Bowls later on, but none of them were great talents coming in. But as a unit, they worked so well together, and that was what was so special about that team. Deal wasn't a supremely talented offensive lineman. Snead, O'Hara, these guys weren't supremely talented. McKenzie, but together, they were a great offensive line, and together, they were a great team. That team fought, and they knew how to win football games, and that's something we hope this team develops. Now, he says you can't point to the fact that they're young. I tend to disagree with that somewhat. Now, I'm not saying that they should be given a full pass because they're young, but you look around this roster. The defense has 5 rookies starting in the lineup, pretty much, The offense has a ton of young players. So you need this team to have some time to play together to get going. That Eli Manning team, he came into an established team, right? They were a competitive football team. Even his rookie year before he stepped in as the quarterback, they had a winning record. The next year, they went 11-5. That team had a good supporting cast. You still had great players on your defense, and you had an emerging offensive line, along with a Tiki Barber and players like that. Guys who had been through the battles, guys who had been to a previous Super Bowl, who had playoff experience. Jeremy Shockey, had been to the playoffs. Tiki Barber had been to a Super Bowl. Michael Strahan had been to a Super Bowl. This team doesn't have players like that. They only have 2 players on this roster currently that are from the Super Bowl era, and that's Diassi and Eli. And since the last Super Bowl they won, they went to the playoffs once, and most of the players on that team are no longer on the team. They got rid of all the big free agents that they brought in that year outside of Jenkins. So they don't have guys that have been there. They don't have guys who have had success, including their head coach. And I'm not giving Pat Shurmur a pass anymore. I'm not giving him a full pass. Now, I always say it's not all his fault. There's a lot of the blame that goes around, whether it's the players, whether it's the defensive coordinator, whether it's the owner, whether it's Dave Gettleman. But Pat Shurmur is not Tom Coughlin. He's not even close. Tom Coughlin was a leader of men, and they respected him. And that's something that a lot of people call into question with Pat Shurmur. But the biggest problem, the biggest problem I had with, not even a problem, the thing I disagree with most, I guess, what he said. For one, we don't have leaders. That's the biggest problem with this football team. One of the biggest problems with this football team. And, well, I think we do have potential talent. Like, you can argue Saquon Barkley is more talented, gifted than anybody that was on that roster. You could certainly argue that. On the defense, I don't see anybody that was as talented as a Michael Strahan or a Justin Tuck. But, yeah, Saquon Barkley maybe. And maybe you could argue Daniel Jones has more gifts than an Eli Manning in terms of being an athlete, things of that nature. But Eli Manning had a great arm. But I disagree with that. But I think the thing I took from what he said, this team lacks leadership, from the top down, from the head coach to the players from within the organization. And that's what I think the New York Giants attempted to clean up by bringing in guys that they thought were high-character guys, Antoine Bethea, Golden Tate. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and those guys aren't going to fix the team overnight. They're Band-Aids. They're not going to be here when the team is good. But we'll see, man. The culture thing definitely did not work in the first year. But to be fair, when you bring in a rookie quarterback, much like we did with Eli Manning, you can't expect instant results. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of change to this roster and to upper management, whether it be the head coach or the coordinators. We're going to have to wait and see. But I thought it was very telling what Jacob said. And what I took out of that mostly was this team needs leadership. And right now, the only guy that I see as a big-time leader on this team is Saquon Barkley. And hopefully the big-ticket free agents that they may bring in this offseason could bring that to this team, because they certainly need some veteran leadership, some guys that are battle-tested. And we're still at least 2 or 3 years away before we could really get to the level of those football teams. But as always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.